This is Steve Zeltzer with KPFA WorkWeek Radio. Recently, the president of the Teamsters, Jim Hoffa, has called for support for President Trump's trade war and the effort to have tariffs. And this is affecting workers and farmers, many people throughout the United States. And it raises questions whether or not working people in this country should support tariffs and trade war with China. And to address that issue is the vice president of the Teamsters, John Palmer, for southern part of the USA. And he's joining us on WorkWeek Radio to talk about this issue and others. Welcome to WorkWeek Radio.
Hey, Steve. How are you? It's good to be on, and I think this is a really, really important subject.
So, John, has there been any discussion in the union leadership about supporting this tariff and the trade war before the president took that position?
There wasn't, and it's a shame. It was a position that he took, I guess, on his own without much discussion with the rest of us. He may have talked to some of his consultants that literally run our union. But, our drivers, particularly in the transportation and warehousing, the whole supply chain, they're all affected by this. This is a dangerous game that's being played by the president. And, it's a very complex issue. This is not 1960 anymore, the day and age of, saying that we can make everything here. And while I wish we could, the fact and the reality is that we live in a global economy now.
Well, the WTO and the capital that was invested in China, a lot of that was American capital, American companies, corporations, wasn't it?
Yes, and of course, the politicians in both parties, frankly, have been party to agreeing to these things and putting us in a position we're in today. But you if you're going to move forward, you have to start from where you're at. So the one thing that strikes me the most about the position of some of these leaders who chime in on this sort of 60s rhetoric is they're out of touch with they're trying to play out of a playbook that was played out of in the 50s and 60s. Those days are gone. That ship sailed. Toothpaste is out of the tube.
Now, one of the things that President Hoffa says is that, in fact, it's easy for Teamsters who are high paid can go and buy American-made products, and he does that. He only buys American-made products, and that's the solution to this crisis, this economic crisis that working people are in here and around the world. What do you buy that?
Well, I know that we do have members that adhere to that philosophy. I think in many ways, if you're looking for clothing or electronics, you would be hard-pressed to find an American-made product. And, they're not going to retool factories and move them back here. The problem is a fair balance in trade, and that's not going to be solved by a trade war. I guess to your point, I think there are a lot of our members, the part-timers at UPS, who are now the majority of the workforce, who are still at really low wages. The new contract takes them to $15 an hour 5 years from now. They can't afford to go out and buy high-priced products. They're a victim to the economy. And
so you're saying the President Hoffa of the Teamsters negotiated a contract for Teamster members at UPS that won't even take them to $15 an hour until 5 years from now?
That is correct. I guess in all fairness, it would be a little less than that because it took 7 or 8 months to pass the contract. And by the way, this is a contract that was rejected by the membership. They imposed the 2/3 rule and forced the contract on the membership. So this wasn't a contract that the members wanted. Was opposed upon.
So he seems to be making a big publicity campaign to support trade war against China, but it sounds like he wouldn't even stand up for the working Teamsters at UPS, the part-timers who are basically living on starvation wages.
Yeah, well, that's true. And, this idea of he asserts and makes plenty of claims about how good the economy is. And, of course, the Republicans, Donald Trump, and many politicians of all ilk are claiming that our economy is great. But we know that the working class, and particularly younger working Americans, are working 2 and 3 jobs with no hope of a pension, no hope of decent health care, just to get by, and that the fact that you're working 3 jobs doesn't mean that we have a great economy. It means that people aren't getting paid enough to afford the necessities of life. Creating a trade war is not going to make it easier on these people at the bottom of the food chain. And unfortunately, the middle class, grown that direction. It hasn't grown towards the well-to-do in this country.
And your President Hoffa has spoken out quite strongly to support this trade war again, as I said. But did he speak out strongly against the attack on African Americans, Latinos, the xenophobia of the Trump administration?
No, and I mean, we've had issues of racism and sexism within our own international union, and they have over the years, frankly, buried them and spent money to make it go away. Hired attorneys instead of addressing the real problem. And I think the height, it's just the height of hypocrisy in the Teamsters union at the international union, and it's got to change. We have one female on the general executive board. We have one black man on the general executive board. There's 24 positions. We have 2 Hispanic gentlemen on the general executive board. Our membership looks nothing like that. I understand why, frankly, while I find it sad, I understand why many of our members voted for Donald Trump. Their frustration with our union, our failure to really fight for the things that they want dealt with.
And one of the issues that has really hammered the Teamsters was the introduction of deregulation of trucking, and actually it started before that in the airlines with Carter, Alfred Kahn, who deregulated the airlines. This deregulation, how did it affect the Teamsters over-the-road contracts?
Well, on the whole, our big employers were the less than truckload carriers, which dominated the industry. At one point, there was almost 250,000 LTL truckers like myself that were, had high-paying Teamster jobs. The effect of that has finally, come home to roost. And if I'm not wrong, the number's less than 50,000 Teamsters employed in that industry now. And there's been a steady decline in our abilities to negotiate good, strong contracts. And much of that is a failure of the international union to commit resources to organizing these groups. They've gone after the easy targets and frankly raided a lot of other unions and associations and stole their members in other industries. Now, I believe that everybody should be represented, but if you look at the Teamsters logo, there's 2 horses on a wheel there. It started with transportation and trucking. We're perfectly positioned in the supply chain, the global supply chain, to organize. I mean, what other union has warehousing, has trucking? We have a port division. We have a waste division. We could take stuff from the manufacturer to the dump throughout the whole cycle to the landfill. Yet we're not chasing those industries. We're not sustaining our core membership.
And the issue of deregulation, it was brought in by the Democrats and Republicans. It's harmed airline workers. It's harmed Teamsters. There didn't seem to be any kind of political education nationally against deregulation and the introduction of independent contractors. I know here in San Francisco, the cab drivers used to be Teamsters, but they were made independent contractors, and now you have a situation where companies want everyone to be independent contractors, like FedEx and other companies.
Well, that's a shame. One of the positive areas that the Teamsters are working in are the ports. It's going to be a tremendously long battle, but they have the same issue in the ports, and the effectiveness campaign in the port has started out there in the Los Angeles area through some very creative organizing, but the independent contractor issue is huge in that segment of our industry, and these folks are driving trucks, in many areas other than LA where we've had success that are clearly unsafe and putting families at risk, and they're transporting these goods. I mean, these jobs need to be jobs, high-paying jobs, where people can stimulate the economy. And that's my fear with this trade agreement. It's a very dangerous game to play. If we make a mistake and get into a full-fledged trade war, the amount of goods that are going to be moved by our members, Mr. Hoffa seemed to be confident that the economy is resilient and we're fine. yeah, I'm sorry, but if these goods are not moving, our members are not working. So, you need to give real thought to taking on something that's serious. China is our biggest trading partner. We've attacked the Canadians, who are our biggest. They receive more goods from us than any other country. Our closest ally. Why are we doing this?
Well, that's what happens, isn't it? When a country goes into decline in imperial power, you start attacking other countries like that and to get a competitive advantage. Seems like that's historically what's happened.
I think it's really unfortunate. I think in some ways many of Americans are blinded to what's going on, and currently with these. I think I'm going to say it, the height of incompetency in the Trump administration. It just exposes itself day after day, and yeah, we are creeping towards an imperial presidency, and there are some serious constitutional issues right now. People ignoring subpoenas. If you and I ignored a subpoena, we'd go to jail.
Yeah, before we go on to that, I wanted to talk about what's going on here in the Bay Area. There's an effort by the A's owner, John Fisher, who owns the Gap Corporation. He runs these charter schools, Rocket Ship and the KIP charter school chain, to take over part of the port in Oakland and build a stadium on working port land. And it seems that the building trades and the Labor Council and even the Teamsters are supporting this stadium on working port land. Do you think the Teamsters Union should be supporting deindustrialization of these ports like Los Angeles? I mean, if it happens in San Francisco, it happened in other ports, to turn them into Disneylands or that kind of thing?
Well, I think that if you look at sports in general, and you want to talk about welfare, down in Texas, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I don't know how old that stadium is that George Bush built. It's not very old. And the taxpayers across this country continue to pay for stadiums for these rich team owners. And I think it's great to provide jobs, but if you've got to fundamentally do something that's immoral and unfair to the taxpayers and the working class in order to put people, they're going to build a stadium. It was proven in Los Angeles, right? The community said, no, you want a stadium, you build it. Well, he's building it, and we're still employing people. But at least there's a moral stand there that the taxpayers said, no, it doesn't mean that much to us. I just think I love sports as well as the next guy. I'm a huge, huge fan of sports. But I don't think it's our job to fund the public to fund these things. They make plenty of money. They don't need our help.
And privatization of public land, which is a big issue around the country, selling off of public land to billionaires so they can make more money.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump's history and, with eminent domain. I mean, back to my earlier statement, there are some serious moral issues here, and it seems that we've been on this track since the 80s, enriching the corporations and the wealthy, and the idea that somehow this trickle-down thing works. I mean, we know it doesn't work. David Stockman wrote the book, right? He's the guy that started the trickle-down theory, and he said it doesn't work. We know it doesn't work.
And there's also the issue nationally of automation and the drive for robotic trucks and robotic taxi cars that would put potentially millions of workers. Are you concerned about who is going to benefit from this and how it will affect working people, whether they're union or whether they're not union?
Steve, I'm not an educated man, but did take simple economics in high school, and I think we're headed. People keep saying that these people will find other jobs, but they're going to press and push until this happens. We're headed to a place where we're going to have, as a society, a discussion about do people have a right to work, let alone how do these folks that are wealthy expect to sustain their incomes if the core of the working class doesn't have any money to buy anything with? And that some people argue that's a skeptical position, but I think we're nearing this with technology. To me, it's a conversation that needs to be had. It's a frightening prospect.
And is this something that the Teamsters union is addressing, as well as other unions? I mean, automation, robotics, information technology threatens to put many more millions of workers out of their jobs.
The issue of the robotic trucks or the automated trucks has come into play. I know one of the locals down here in Texas, there was an early experiment that UPS wanted to try, which is called platooning. If you're familiar with some of the newer cars, if you get too close, they'll actually start to decelerate, and they have a radar that sort of keeps you from having an accident. These things are good, but the idea behind the platooning is initially, before we get to the driverless trucks, we're going to try following with this technology. We're able to get a tighter following distance between the trucks and platoon them down the highway. Therefore, UPS will save, a half a mile to the gallon or whatever, or these other trucking companies. So right now that has been put on hold due to the concerns that, it's obvious that if you've got any kind of gap in between these trucks, if a car slides into between them, or this technology's not proven yet, and I think at some point there's going to be some horrific accidents around this. But I don't believe that the corporate entities are going to stop pushing for this. And to your question, I sit in a room full of dinosaurs who still want to talk about the things that happened 20 or 30 years ago. We need to educate our members, and we need to educate the general public. We're not doing that. We did a horrible job on the Employee Free Choice Act. We never raised the real issue of how employees are abused in the organizing process and how our labor laws are worthless. And
the issue of workplace bullying, there's an epidemic of it. Workers are afraid to even mention the word union for fear of being fired. What is going to stop that? Because that is growing, and workers are becoming angrier and angrier as they see their conditions decline. And you've had these teacher strikes and other protests. It seems like workers are becoming more and more fed up about their conditions and their future.
Well, that's a great question, because you look at what's happened with who wouldn't be proud of the teachers in West Virginia and many of these other states. My wife is a retired school teacher here in Texas. They really, in many of these cases, these folks didn't have the right to strike, but they knew the value of their labor. They knew that they couldn't be replaced, and they did it anyway. And they didn't do it following the traditional leadership who told them not to do it. We can work this out. We've been on this track for 50 years of working this out with employers and letting politicians, paying politicians to get elected who don't represent us. We spend millions of dollars of our PAC fund, drive fund, on politicians who do nothing more than pay us lip service. The bullying in our workplaces at UPS is done by the management. It's horrible. We've negotiated new language. We've got the language in the contract. I would hate to go to Vegas and bet that that's going to do anything to change stuff. I just got a call this morning from a member who was had physically been not necessarily attacked, but physically touched or slapped at when he was trying to break up a fight between a couple of supervisors. He's afraid to do anything because he's afraid he'll get fired and the union won't stand up for him. This is just hard to believe.
And the disenchantment with both the Democrats and Republicans has led to some working people saying it's time for a Labor Party, it's time for a Workers' Party, that working people are going to have to represent them. Are you supportive of that idea?
Well, certainly I am. Any pragmatic person will also tell you how difficult that's going to be with the two parties that dominate our political system and clearly, are funded by corporations. We the people, as a guy that's been an organizer all our life, this is all going to have to be grassroots. We have to. The example I gave you this morning, somebody's got to stand up, and we're going to be left with a situation of either continuing down this road of giving away our middle class and our well-being in exchange for our little comfort zone until our comfort zone's gone. And then I think folks are going to wake up. I hope that we can do something about this before we get there. I'm not that big of a skeptic, but we certainly have serious problems in this country, and people aren't standing up.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for joining us on WorkWeek Radio. We've been talking with John Palmer, who is a vice president for the South in the Teamsters, an international vice president, and he's been discussing with us the issue of the support for the tariffs and the trade war by Jim Hoffa, president of the Teamsters, and other issues. So thanks for joining us on WorkWeek Radio.
You got it.